Breath of the Wild, which was released in 2017, was met with enormous success, and I always wanted to play it, but I was the broke college kid that couldn't justify buying a Switch in order to experience it. I had heard all the great things Breath of the Wild brought to the mix from just about everyone, but I figured I'd do what I guess a lot of you guys do too. I would watch other people play it and talk about their own experiences. But if you've played Elden Ring versus watching the game, you know how much of a difference it really has. Every boss can look easy to dodge and hit when you see it as a spectator, and every path seems so easy when you've watched multiple people make the jump forward. I don't say this to sound like a lecture, I say this because I was so entirely wrong about Breath of the Wild. Games, especially great ones, are meant to be played and not always watched if you can. There's the experimental ones that are easier enjoyed for video essays instead of dealing with the jank to get to the point. This video will go over my journey into Tears of the Kingdom for someone who played Elden Ring first, since the two are compared non-stop, and I know a lot of people out there would like to know if Zelda is worth getting into for an Elden Ring player. This video will also break down major plot points and serve as a review, so major spoilers ahead. Subscribe since 97% of you guys are not, and I want to hit 50k for that video I promised to make. Like the video, use code Evan for some anime waifu shakers and flavors at Gamersubs to lock in deep for this one. This video is broken up into chapters by time code if you'd like to experience each of them individually. At first, I was only going to talk about Tears of the Kingdom, but as the release got closer, I realized that would be doing a disservice. If Breath of the Wild truly inspired aspects of Elden Ring, then I would need to play that and beat it. No matter how many video essays I watched on the game in college, I needed to form my own opinion. I didn't grow up with Zelda. In fact, Zelda was a game that was almost shamed in my middle school. Back then, it wasn't cool to play games unless it was shooters or sports. And even though I got Twilight Princess for Christmas, my parents couldn't find a Wii for 2 more years. Bless their hearts for searching non-stop, but I missed any chance I was going to have to play Zelda, and I moved on to Xbox 360 instead. I went back a couple years ago and beat Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess, and Wind Waker. Ocarina and Twilight offered a similar feeling, but Wind Waker no doubt inspired Breath of the Wild more than the other two games, with its more open world setting. But water. A lot of water. When I had first seen Breath of the Wild, I had watched the video from Joseph Anderson, and if you don't know, Joseph Anderson, well, he typically doesn't like games that everybody else likes. I think he reserves some really good opinions, and he does offer new perspective, but I kind of went into the game thinking that. And I listened to the advice of my friend Glad, who said that Breath of the Wild isn't really a Zelda game. He said it was no doubt great, but it's not Zelda. And as somebody who didn't grow up with it, I just had to see what people were talking about. Finally, it was time to experience Breath of the Wild. The first steps into Limgrave are not the same as the first steps into the Great Plateau. While both games share the same introduction into what's about to be a massive world with a door-opening revelation, one as you fight a tree sentinel and get your ass kicked, and the other one has pretty clear objectives in front of you. Link has almost no abilities when you first start, but enemies don't really fill the land the way they do in Elden Ring. See, that's the first major difference. Zelda is all about exploration and experimentation, while Elden Ring focuses on combat and building into a fight. Sure, there's some enemies in the Great Plateau, but they usually have a fire or some sort of interactable around them you will discover by trying random ideas popped into your brain. Breath of the Wild rewards your intrusive thoughts. In Limgrave, you can't go more than 20 steps without running into a group of enemies, and it's all about learning the timings. Then the weapon's weight and power, finally managing stamina and health. I started to realize very quickly that these games may look similar, but offer completely different paths, even if they do nod to each other here and there. This is also where you start to feel Zelda wants you to go through the tutorial area. And I know Breath of the Wild broke the norm for tutorials in Zelda. I've played Twilight Princess, so I get it. It's a lot better. But you can clearly see that Elden Ring was like, I don't know, figure it out. Maybe go to a big castle if you want to. Breath of the Wild just says, you want to move around in a fun way? Well, you're going to need to go through all these tutorial shrines first. And I understand why. Do we really want a game aimed for a younger audience to hear about being emboldened by the flame of ambition after 15 minutes? Zelda is a lot more straightforward than Elden Ring in most ways, because, well, it's a pseudo-kids game. But don't let that fool you one bit. Every time you think you're about to wreck the enemies in front of you, you'll hear that piano come in with the game over screen. I'm gonna go ahead and say Nintendo took this one from the From Software book. Once the tutorial is over, the King of Hyrule, King Roam, tells you about the great evil Ganon that took over all of the divine beasts and guardians when they thought they had the upper hand on Ganon. It's pretty cookie cutter, but I don't mind that since Elden Ring dialogue is in old speak and cryptic to the point where things like Estelle stealing architecture to build his arena is just now being found. Shout out to Smotown, by the way, for that one. But the main key is that you are the chosen one in Zelda, while in Elden Ring you are the tarnished, the lowest ranking, no chance of doing anything player. No NPC in Elden Ring ever respects the player, and it's by design that the player is never meant to be happy. Well, except for Fia. She respects the player a little bit too much. She has, other goals. Speaking of that, when you paraglide out of the Great Plateau on your way to Kakariko Village, there are plenty of NPCs along the way. Mini shops, horse keepers, lots of hotel inns, and just random travelers on their own journeys. I really don't like how the horses operate in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom versus Torrent in Elden Ring. It is so goddamn annoying! This is the portion of the game that really opens up what Breath of the Wild is about. And at times, I felt like I had this ADHD itch to never be satisfied where I was going. The cliff looked fun to climb, and I'm sure the Koroks would make that jingle when I was up there, but now there's a new cliff with something else to chase that's even taller. Maybe this is a metaphor of life. No mountain is high enough, but every pit is worth falling down. Hey, that's for the sequel. Oh, yeah, that's right. I really liked that every single time I wanted to go somewhere, there was a neat puzzle or reward for my time. This is when the shrines also started to make more and less sense. The shrines are small puzzles spread throughout the open world to test you on game mechanics, becoming progressively harder yet more rewarding as time goes on. So rewarding, in fact, that the hardest shrines with keys and puzzles, the likes you'd see in a traditional Zelda dungeon, reward a full heart container. At least this is what I thought was going to happen. See, shrines were a gamble more than anything. You would do this puzzle that microwaved your brain for hours. Then you would do a tutorial shrine after the tutorial area, and the reward? The exact same. Sometimes even better than the big shrines. I get that Nintendo was trying to place the harder shrines in areas that were more catered to deep into the playthrough, but with the way the game is set up to constantly beg your attention to the next shrine location, and with how I personally enjoy games, this felt lackluster. I feel this is where Breath of the Wild also falls in line with Elden Ring, and it's like if I were to do a dungeon in Limgrave way after beating a dungeon in the capital, so of course I'd be underwhelmed. But the thing about Elden Ring is that I can't just go anywhere anytime, right? I have to progress past the main boss in the area. Is it my fault for venturing off, or is it the game's fault for not labeling a tougher shrine? The journey continued with a talk to Impa, who basically regurgitates the same thing Roham told us. But she makes it clear that Link is the key. He's the Link. I'll be here all week, guys. Which you knew when you turned the game on. She tells us the location of the 4 divine beasts, and then the game becomes a journey of really just choosing your own adventure. Fight random Skeletor bosses around, rock monsters, explore, use your kit, take down shrines, climb, a lot of climbing. It's cold, it's hot, you're just doing stuff. I think Breath of the Wild handled this part a lot better than Elden Ring. There's just something about this typical Metroidvania style of having the options to go wherever, and you're always making progress that feels better than needing to kill a boss to advance the path. And that's what gives it an even more open world approach. But man, one thing that annoyed me in Breath of the Wild was this cooking feature. I gotta get up and dance every time I hear the jingle. But I just wish once I got the recipe, I could make it from the pause screen and not drop it in a pot every time and wait for Tears of the Kingdom, because yeah, this sucked before, but it doesn't have to suck forever. This wasted so much time when I could be doing the fun exploring. But then again, Elden Ring only has a heal through a flask, and crafting is pretty boring most of the time, so it's something both games have that just, yeah, it's not for me. As I kept going, I realized which divine beast order the game clearly wanted me to go for. Starting with my favorite temple in Ocarina of Time and featuring the Zoras, we have the water the divine beast. See, even though you can choose your path, the game has you revisit Impa, then nudges you with some side quests and other objectives that point you this way. You don't have to do it this way, but I'd imagine more first-time players like myself came out here this way. Along the journey of more shrines and fun puzzles and a climb to the Zora Kingdom, we are told about the Lionels, these centaur lions that were such an increase in difficulty, and I loved it. One dick move that I also loved was that Nintendo changes the game over color every time you die to the element that you die with. And in this case, Lionel's lightning arrows. I wish the game penalized me for spamming food every time I got hit, because sometimes it feels unfair to get my ass beat, then heal instantly. There's no trade-off. Or maybe I'm just indoctrinated by From Software's bullying, so I think there should be a trade-off for everything. After Lionel met his end, because he was just that easy. Oh my god. It was onto the first divine beast. This gigantic elephant. The divine beast was beginning to feel exactly what a traditional Zelda dungeon was like. But right when it really hit its stride, it was over. This is where Breath of the Wild felt different from other Zeldas, where you normally get a new ability from the dungeon and then use that to the fullest in the dungeon. Breath of the Wild already gave you the abilities in the first 30 minutes of the game. So the only thing to do is to control the divine beast and use its trunk in this case as a mechanic while using what you already have to solve the other puzzles. This is also something you don't see in the Souls series ever, because it's such a different game, which could be a nice addition to Elden Ring in the DLC or a future game. Adding some more puzzle-like mechanics like they have in dungeons, but to a larger, more linear area. Just a thought. After Phantom Ganon got his cheeks clapped, because I had Lionel's bow and a sword, the first divine beast was complete, and it was on to the other three. I can say that shrines do a better job than Elden Ring on replayability, since its dungeons suffer the same way. There are very easy dungeons and there are some nightmare ones, but the rewards in Zelda are guaranteed, whereas Elden Ring, it's discovery, keeping Zelda's replayability for those other playthroughs refreshing. The only time I enjoyed Elden Ring's dungeons on other playthroughs was if an item randomizer was enabled. Then you don't know what you're getting, and maybe this point discredits my idea of labeling harder shrines for stronger rewards, but you'd still get closer to hearts and stamina either way. Gerudo Valley is where I headed next, and this was probably the best portion of the game for the main journey. It's not because all of the Gerudo women have the hots for Link, but because the Yiga clan quest mixed with the way to get in, and the payoff of a true marketplace felt great. This is where armor upgrading is really presented to the player, and set bonuses are talked about. Before in Zelda games, rupees were nice, but there was never anything really worth grinding for, and even here you don't need this stuff, but it helps more than the other Zeldas, and I can appreciate that. It's something I was hoping Elden Ring would have more of, but mods like the Convergence mod and Cinders usually add those RPG elements to armor. Nintendo are also masters at music, because when you enter Gerudo, it sounds something like this. Whoops, that one was my favorite one. Let me change it to, okay, here we go. Boom! The whole game is full of gems. This section is also where I found that every shrine next to a village shares the mechanic of the divine beast you will fight, as this one was full of electricity puzzles and keeping the current alive, and so too was the beast. This divine beast had my favorite of the puzzles, and the boss was okay. But again, right when it was hitting the notes I liked, it ended. At least the abilities we get from the divine beasts are overpowered as hell. Elephant gives you a full heal and then some when you're supposed to die. The camel gives you this powerful electric zap. And, well, let's talk about my least favorite one. The Rito Village and the bird. This one was just over before it began. You could talk to some of the villagers and then this dude out there shooting some arrows. Once you pass a very easy trial, you can begin the divine beast in the sky. And this time, there is no Lionel to defeat for electric arrows. You just have bomb arrows handed to you. This divine beast was also my least favorite since the puzzles were very simple, and 2 of the terminals were the exact same process. The boss was also just too simple, but at least the ability of flight by holding jump is the best in the game. This is also when I noticed the gripes of Breath of the Wild's open world and the story were boring me, as each place offers almost the exact same story. And it was by design since you can do these in any order, but seeing each cutscene after the Divine Beast was just so lackluster after the first time. The final Divine Beast is where the game felt it picked up in the difficulty department a lot. You need to craft a heat elixir to even enter the area, and the enemies are much stronger. I learned there is scaling, so no matter which path you take, there is internal XP that determines how much damage you take, and let me tell you, the volcano was solid. The Divine Beast was no doubt the last one Nintendo wanted you to tackle, as you'd have to understand the game's cooking and have enough stamina to climb the volcano efficiently. And the Divine Beast feels the most difficult of the bunch overall. I think the Sand Camel was the toughest puzzle, but this was the toughest package as the boss wasn't exactly free to beat. After the journey, we moved on to Ganon's castle. This is the finale I know everyone was hoping for, and man, it was anticlimactic. You can go and get the Master Sword, but nothing forces you to if you want to defeat Ganon. You can do the story picture quest, adding tons of backstory to the world, but you don't have to, and the game actively doesn't push you towards that. You can explore the castle to the fullest, or do what I did and accidentally walk into the final boss fight. I will say that for this playthrough, I didn't engage in all of the side content, but I also want you to know that even without all that, I found this ending to be so basic compared to the epic journey of Elden Ring, and after beating Tears of the Kingdom, you'll know that that one is a much better finale. That music of entering the final castle and knowing the toughest enemies will be in front of you is something I always admired in Zelda. I will never forget when Ocarina of Time made me use bomb chews for the first time ever, and the only time they were ever needed was in the final castle, just as I will never forget the journey to fight Radagon and Elden Beast. But in Breath of the Wild, I just stumbled in. There was a lot of detail in the castle too, but I stumbled into Ganon and I was not gonna back down. This fight instills that same raw adrenaline that classic Zeldas have, and even Radagon had, and you feel the tense pressure of fighting the final boss. This could have been impossibly difficult, but the reward of completing the Divine Beasts are also shown here too, as all those phantoms of Ganon you fought on the Divine Beasts are no longer a boss fight here, and the main Ganon boss has, what, half HP? Maybe this is a little too strong. All I know is that the powers of the Divine Beast are fully on display, as the shield parry from Volcano helps the deflection mechanic, the thunder kept him stunned, the heal, well, heals, and the jump will come into play in the Elden Beast Ganon fight. Yeah, that's right. Where do you think FromSoft got the inspiration for Elden Beast? Jokes aside, Zelda has been doing the final after the final thing for years, and it doesn't disappoint here either. Princess Zelda tosses you the light arrow bow, you shoot Ganon's weak points, fly up for one final shot, and with that, Breath of the Wild's main story is done. There is something to be said about the simplicity Zelda provides in story and scope. Breath of the Wild was nothing but a major accomplishment in gaming, flipping open worlds on their head, but Breath of the Wild was quick to receive 10 out of 10s, as it felt like Nintendo fans and critics who hold the nostalgia of Ocarina of Time to such a high standard, we're missing any wrongdoings the game had. Obviously, overall, it's a masterpiece, but that doesn't mean it's not a game that can age, and a game that was built with many flaws. Insert a quote about flaws at this point in the video to make me sound pretentious, and swathing some wine around and saying, indubitably. After the success of Elden Ring, the fight started about which open world was the best out there, and while both look the same on the surface, in the depths, they could not be more different. The word depths is the video essay cool transition into talking about Tears of the Kingdom. You see, while Elden Ring offered one location in the sky, a lot bigger of a map on the ground, and a massive underground, Tears of the Kingdom offers a bunch of sky, the same or a bit more land than last time, and a much larger underground than Elden Ring. Initially, my idiot brain jumped to seeing the underground as a one-up of Elden Ring's underground, but again, I was a fool to think so. The game starts out in the depths with Zelda this time, after you had rescued her, and years later after the calamity of Ganon. The game starts with a completely different tone from Breath of the Wild. You are maxed out in every health and stamina department, you have the Master Sword equipped, and Zelda is exploring the depths with you into the deep cave. You can even see the entire story of what's about to happen on the wall's murals, with some of it blocked for later. You awaken this zombie, and one of the best cutscenes in Zelda plays out.
Rauru placed his faith in you.
Instead of very relaxed objectives and pacing, the game is constantly reminding you that evil is around and we let it happen. Tears of the Kingdom then says, here is a dive button. And this time we're going to outdo our last title card to make sure FromSoft can't yoink the dive down mechanic. You know what you must do. Tears has a much longer tutorial than Breath of the Wild, and it's important to learn about what the Zonai are and how to use their devices. You are given King Raru's Hidden Hand ability, after it pulls away from Ganondorf and onto you for a reason you don't know about yet. Zelda is snatched away, and you are too. After gaining the Hidden Hand, you use it to combine objects in a nod to Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts. But this time, it actually works. This ability, other than getting used to the rotating and its annoyances, has been making every game designer lose their minds. And I gotta say, I cannot count how many tweets I've seen with game developers drooling over this. And I gotta say, I've never seen physics like this in games that I can remember. This is the main ability all game. So if you don't like it at all, then I cannot recommend Tears of the Kingdom to you. You use this ability to go to your next shrines in the tutorial. You have one where you get the Ascend ability, which I found out was a dev tool. That's kind of cool. There is something to be said that maybe one day the Ascend ability can break speedrunning if you can copy the interaction, then do it wherever you'd like to. But that's about a year or two from now, right? Surely. You then get the ability to fuse weapons to anything, from rocks to break boulders to bomb barrels on your shield for a height boost. You can even slap a minecart on your shield to grind the rails and get the final ability in the Temple of Time. Yeah, the Temple of Time is in the sky, and it gives you the recall ability, an ability that pushes the object's time backwards, making this gear go the way you need it to go instead. Don't think too hard about the reality of these abilities. I mean, there's a wolfman with a giant hand that talks to you through different pieces of time. All of these abilities you learn are pushed to the fullest, where I felt in Breath of the Wild, stasis and one of the two bombs weren't really necessary for a lot of the objectives. That's the thing, right? Tears of the Kingdom has much better abilities than Breath of the Wild. Unless you speedran Breath of the Wild, then I can't blame you for liking the abilities more. Tears then makes you lose your broken Master Sword. This cool dragon pulls up, and you get to dive down to Hyrule. Water doesn't hurt this man, Link! If Elden Ring's big holy crap was in that first moment of going underground, Tears of the Kingdom was in the moment of being up in the sky. Then, you realize, another moment is about to happen, as there are gigantic holes all throughout Hyrule. You head to the lookout view and meet the first of many characters showing a time progression. This is Pura after the new and improved Pura pad replacing the Sheikah slate. Pura was a child in the last game after de-aging herself, but is now in her 20s for all of you degenerates who are gonna rule 30 for her. You are given the assignment to investigate the remaining Hyrule Castle after it went into the sky, and here you see Zelda? But it's a projection of her? You head back and open up the first new map area, the Skyview Tower at Lookout Landing. Here you are also given the paraglider, and man, without this, the game is so much slower. You get shot up into the sky every time you open one of these up, and it's much better than a sky view from Breath of the Wild. These are also how you will access the sky again. Now that you have a paraglider, you can jump into any hole around the area to explore the depths. The depths for the first time almost was like that first visit to Nokron. But unlike Nokron, I thought I was going to be in for a rich adventure with the skybox lighting up and exploration rewarded everywhere, but I soon found out that the depths was fairly empty until the end game, which it's fine, but I think in the future a lot more people will look back on this place with a hindsight for improvement. Here is where you get the final ability outside of your camera, and amiibos, and this one slaps. This is called Autobuild, and it will save inventions you like. If you find blueprints, it stores them, and if you're missing parts, you can use Zonite from the underground to pay for them to be created. It is the cherry on top of Hidden Hand, but I think a lot of people will miss this one until the end game. I know this because I missed this until the end game, but more on this a bit later. The depths for now is just a place to light up and grab roots to uncover the map, which is nice because above every single route is a shrine that has its name backwards from the depths route and vice versa. Wait, let me become a video essay guy for a second. In a stroke of poetic storytelling, Nintendo was able to convey the imprisoning war in the roots, needing light to shine on this otherwise dark and treacherous ravine of despair. Speaking of despair, the Koroks are back, and just as fun as last time, guys. This time, though, fans have tortured these little shitheads. Engineers. Angry Nintendo fans. Using technology to hate Koroks. This time, instead of divine beasts controlled by Ganon, there are regional phenomena in the same 4 spots as the last game. You can choose any order just like the last game, but again, it's like the game nudges you towards one first. This time Rito, since some characters in quests point this place out on your path. Along the way, we have shrines that unfortunately still face the same issue as last game, but at least this time around, there are so many ways to get to the end, unlike in Breath of the Wild, where there was only a few shrines that allowed full creative control. I could see Elden Ring's DLC or future content allowing for more rewarding incentive in the dungeons like the Chalice dungeons had for Bloodborne, but I think that's where the experimentation ends. My favorite shrines in Zelda seem to have this pattern of creativity. When I outsmarted or just questioned if I did a puzzle the intended way, I realized that there wasn't really an intended way. We're all just mad scientists in our own ways. The best shrines for me were the Rails Shrine, the Lava Bridge, and the shrines that made me get creative to kill Zonai enemies with nothing to start and no healing. I will say though, at times, I wish these puzzles forced you into a certain way to do them, especially with the temple puzzles, which we'll get to. Along the journey, Nintendo saw every ADHD child and decided to test them, as there are places to get distracted everywhere. You see a bunny? There's a cave to explore for gems and loot and monsters, but you can ascend to a new place to do a Korok, help a sign guy. Then a block falls from the sky, time to rewind that. Oh, now we're at the top and fight a mini boss to get a green crystal, unlock a shrine puzzle. Then there's the main objective not too far away, but then there's these crop circles that are everywhere. And oh, I think I need the ingredient for a side quest to restore a village, but hey, look, a discovery, better explore. I need the map unlocked, and oh, an old map for buried treasure, better go to the underground and complete the map here. It is overwhelming, but I'm happy to say that other than poor performance in areas, because oh, it gets bad, the game has great quality of life. The cooking problem I had before now has recipes, and you can decrease the amount if you select the wrong ingredient. I feel like this needs to be said again. The cooking now has recipes. The story is now not a picture quest, but instead the crop circle quest with some locations to go to, so it's in your face and it's not something that you can easily miss. And I'm happy to say that the dungeons are, well, almost traditional Zelda dungeons. I started again with the Zora village, which has environmental problems of muddy water everywhere. You need to do a pretty lengthy quest with Sidon to find out how to get up to the source of the problem. You do a bunch of puzzle steps and even this really nice one with a perspective shift using an item on your arrow. Then you are given the Zora armor to climb the waterfall. You enter the low gravity water temple and it's not that good. Look, my bias with temples came from more linear Zeldas, but the water temple here is just sort of boring. You have these bubbles that would be really neat if the ideas were pushed further and if they weren't janky to operate. When you get to the temple part, it's a series of small, even less intriguing puzzles than the divine beast of water. You use Sidon's ability of a bubble shield and slash to power the water turbines, but once you figure that out for the first time, it loses its charm since the rest of the puzzles are the exact same. Once all 4 have been powered, you can fight the boss. This boss was pretty solid as it reminded me of a better form of Morpha from Ocarina of Time, but I wish the rest of the temple was like that water temple. Link and Sidon are talked to by Sidon's ancestor of water, who tells Sidon he now is the Sage of Water, and he tells us about the imprisoning war about Ganondorf to seal away the evil. Now, the bubble ability is with you for the rest of the game as Sidon's phantom follows you around. I then journeyed to Rito after some side quests which were much better this time. Characters and locations were evolved the way you'd want your sequel to do, but even though Breath of the Wild Hyrule was fresh in my mind, Tears of the Kingdom still made me think I was in an entirely new one. Combat allows for more experimentation, and enemies aren't Elden Ring tough, but they are no joke if you're not leveled or prepared for them. I was a lot happier to do side quests in this game, knowing I could get place to place much easier, and there were 3 levels of exploration. So if I got bored of Hyrule, oh, time to jump down a hole. If I got bored of the hole, oh, time to pop up into the sky. After many shrines and quests, I made my way to Rito Village this time since Gerudo had this puzzle that recommended I go to Rito first. And when I went to Rito, it was covered in snow due to the phenomena. I gotta say, getting to the Wind Temple felt underwhelming as hell, but the temple itself was a big step up. The quest has you search for Tulin, who I believe was just a baby in the last game, but the quest is short and abrupt, just like the Rito quest of last game. Tulin gives you the most useful ability in the horizontal burst of wind speed, and it's off to the temple in the sky. Right away, this one is so much better than the water temple, as the obstacles of reaching the wind temple are harder, and the puzzles offer more variety. The music is serene, as is the environment you're in. Maybe I just like water temples indoors and with, more water. But this only gets better when Colgera enters, because listen to the music. Molgera was a boss I recognized from Wind Waker, and Colgera is here to be another great spectacle. I think this boss was definitely less difficult, but they weren't really going for that here, I would think. It was now off to the Gorons, and I gotta say, this is another quest to get there that I didn't like. Death Mountain is a lot better now that you only need the fire resist armor or elixirs to use inside the mountain, but I didn't like how the quest is just over right when you get there. This time the Gorons are eating evil meat. Yunobo has gained a massive streamer ego and is taking capitalism to a whole new level. Yunobo wears this evil mask, I guess, and I think it's cool that you have to fight him, but Zelda shows up and disappears before you can even blink. You head to Death Mountain with Yunobo and complete the Fire Temple, which I think will leave people pretty split. This one allows the most freedom of invention, or climbing in my case, and is another main hub needs to be unlocked for the final boss fight temple. I think time will lend to this being better, but in my experience, I hated using Yunobo to blow up the walls when ramps just don't work for this guy. I also didn't like this much freedom on how to tackle the puzzles. Maybe I'm just a traditional scum, or maybe there's something to be said about allowing you to do puzzles by any means possible. I would have preferred this to be a bit less forgiving. After a pretty mixed feel, you fight the boss Marbled Goma, who has been in 7 different Zelda games. The fight is solid and a bigger step up in difficulty from the last two. One thing I forgot to mention is that after each phenomena, the environment changes. There isn't the same sandstorm in Gerudo, the ink is gone in Zora, the snow is gone in Rito, and the tone of Goron is different as the diet got better. You watch the same cutscene of the sages because the game lets you do them in any order, so you're supposed to see the same thing again, right? Well, this is where I have major issues with Tears of the Kingdom, just like Breath of the Wild. There is so much detail everywhere except for the story. Remember those crop circles? While they are much better than taking pictures of certain places and fix the issue of the story not really being involved in the open world, they have a major flaw. If you begin the Dragon Tier quest, you know what they are for, as they piece together what Zelda is doing in the story. You even take a picture of a map of where they are, and for me, I accidentally spoiled a major plot point well before I was supposed to. Why did Nintendo not make the stories in chronological order, no matter where you go? I saw that Zelda projection was just Phantom Ganondorf well before I found out through the main quest. I cannot believe this is how it went down. Just as I found out these were a quest, I ended up on the southeast side of the map not long after, and without warning, was so much further in Zelda's story. You could argue the pictures on the wall are showing you where to go next, but come on, it's so small, I guarantee most players will miss it. Also, I feel like the interactions with the sages of the past were so generic. Give me something more each cutscene to recognize I've already done other temples and met with other sages. You add new dialogue if I already have items in other side quests and main quests. Why should the main point of caring be this muddy? Past knowing exactly why Zelda is walking around everywhere, I headed back for the 2 for 2 best parts of the game, Gerudo Town. This is a nice long quest with wars against the enemies and defending the town. Great puzzles that reminded me of past Zeldas, and the best and final phenomena of the game, the Thunder Temple. You see the boss early on, and you chase it into a pyramid where you're basically in the Mummy movie. Raiju has her lightning swords, and of course, since she's grown up, she's ready to come fight with you. This temple has all the works of why I like Zelda temples. Great puzzles nodding to the mirror shield from Ocarina of Time, and some that had me scratching my head. The boss is also the toughest of them all. The same generic cutscene does play out, and it's time to go to Hyrule Castle for one final fight. Up until now, this game has really lended to the structure of Breath of the Wild. And while I think it's a great sequel in almost every way, I do think that with all of the overworld side quests acting the same, I can't quite capture those same emotions as Breath of the Wild's experience. Even if I have all these new abilities and quality of life, Breath of the Wild took the Ubisoft format and flipped it on its head. Whether you agree or disagree, and maybe it's not as appreciated nowadays since Elden Ring has been out to also add some life, but there's a reason Breath of the Wild was named the best game of all time on GQ's Top 100. You head into Hyrule Castle, this time definitely not chasing evil Zelda, and this time I couldn't stumble into the wrong place, because Zelda makes you chase her around the castle, which is so much better than accidentally meeting Ganon. After a bunch of cool secrets like the dust bow on the top of the castle, the shrine that's on the castle, tons of great loot, and more, you finally meet Zelda.
I have been waiting for you to arrive. There is something here I want to show you. Hyrule Castle. Perfect and glorious. Memories of our time here? We'll really take in every detail. After all, this place will be the last thing we'll ever see.
Interesting. How is it that you survived my attack? No matter. You will not live to see another sunrise. End this hero's life, my dark servant. Cut him down.
Oh my god, you were Ganondorf the whole time? No way! After beating 6 different Ganondorfs, you escape, and story-wise, this is where the game picks up. Before this, you were in Breath of the Wild, but now we're combining linear Zelda and open world, and I think I prefer this over the Breath format. If Nintendo is really thinking about keeping this format for Zelda from now on, I think for main story they should really consider this type of linear storytelling. Let me explain. So Purah says in order to even hurt Ganondorf, Link needs to find the Master Sword and power it to a much higher level. But to get the Master Sword, you have one of 2 ways. You could do the Ruins quest involving pictures, or you could do the Dragon Tears quest involving the cutscene of Zelda that way. I did the Tears, and let me tell you! These are amazing if you could do them in order no matter what, but the ending is even better as you see that Zelda turned herself into a dragon. That's the funniest joke I've heard in my entire life. And the tears you've been following were her dragon tears. The dragon that took the Master Sword from you was her. And to get the Master Sword, you needed to pull it out of her head. The reveal of getting this sword has to be a top 10 moment in gaming for me. It was that good. I thought this was surely the end, but no. Nintendo has a whole separate quest ready. You solve a riddle to meet this dragon that I thought was the dragon floating above this area of the map, but it's actually just this lake. I thought that was a neat twist. And you grab pieces of a thunder set and then offer a piece of Zonite energy to the Zonite gods. You then shoot up into the sky and complete this Thunder Island with some difficult puzzles. You get this mask and are brought down to the depths where you meet what I call the Diablo 4 door because it requires hearts to get in. It just reminds me too much of that one cinematic meeting Lilith. Remember when I said there was 4 temples? Well, I lied because there's a 5th one called the Temple of what do we call this? The Temple of Zonai. Nope. It's the Spirit Temple. The mask guides you down and you are building a body for Minoru. Remember her? Raru's sister who died in battle and used her spirit to be inside of the Purah pad. No, you don't? Well, here she is. These puzzles were great, but I ended up just using the stakes for a lot of them. I feel like the game shouldn't have allowed me to use my own inventions here because I ended up skipping any critical thinking and just threw together my own stuff to get out. Again, just like other temples, I shouldn't be allowed this benefit. After you repair her, you can ride on top and use her new body as a mech to attach stuff and move fast? I hope you know you can spam battery charges or else you're gonna be in for a very slow walk. At the end of this section is such a goofy boss that it took away from how meaningful the moment is supposed to be. Look, I'm all for a wrestling match, but maybe we should have used this as a side boss and not the Spirit Temple climactic boss. Spirit Temple is now complete, but not before one final cutscene that shows the imprisoning war.
They bore treasures from these same gods, secret stones capable of amplifying the abilities of those who possessed them. Raru gifted Sonia one of the secret stones, This is how the Kingdom of Hyrule, with Rauru and Sonia as its first king and queen, came to be. The leader of the Gerudo, Ganondorf, killed Queen Sonia and stole her secret stone. He then created swarms of monsters and attacked. Hyrule rose up to face these threats, but the evil power driving the monsters forward was staggering. Rauru then came up with a plan to turn the tide of the war. He entrusted secret stones to warriors with exceptional abilities. They became sages and united in an effort to finally defeat the Demon King. The Demon King's power had grown far beyond anything we could have imagined. Our fight appeared all but lost. He committed himself to one final act.
That pride will be your downfall, Ganondorf!
What a clever way to solve your problems. But are you ready to pay the price for this?
Don't be so smug. I know exactly what it will cost me. Years from now, someone will appear with the sword that seals the darkness. A swordsman with the power to defeat you, Link. Remember this name.
Link. Interesting. I look forward to meeting you.
Now it's time for Ganondorf to die, and how fitting is it that the finale is where the game started. You head down with your crew, and on the walls is the complete prophecy. Even Dragon Zelda was there when that part of the prophecy was hidden in the opening. You fight the Demon King's army, and all the bosses are resurrected for each sage to fight. You are now alone with Ganondorf.
How disappointing. This world should be shrouded in darkness, not bathed in insufferable light. All these weak, peace-loving cowards running rampant. It would have been more satisfying to overcome a worthy foe.
Regardless, I will reshape this world as it was meant to be. I will crush any opposition. I will rule. That is what a king must do. Do not look away. You witnessed witness a king's revival. And the birth of his new world.
This is the best Ganondorf fight in my opinion. He is punishing yet fair, difficult in every way, yet never really annoying. Master Sword of Light versus Gloom Katana of Death. After you do defeat him, this happens.
What a feeling. I'd almost forgotten the thrill of battle. That feeling as blood surges in my veins. And I am not even nearing the limits of my power. Enjoy these final moments. I will be taking far more than you're on this time.
There's something so funny about that health bar. This is where I see Nintendo's potential at making hard bosses like From Software, because they clearly can, and holy crap, Ganondorf is tough. After I eventually beat him, aka spammed attack because my parries and perfect timings were awful, and he dodges flurry strikes, it was the end.
I will yet rule this land. It will not stop me. And the immortal will not stand in my way. My mind, everything. I'll sacrifice it all to destroy you. And cast this world into eternal night.
Ganondorf becomes a dragon. The funniest Zelda dragon comes in to help, and you are riding a dragon to defeat another dragon. Someone at Nintendo wrote this idea when they were 10 years old, and I love it. After a climactic ending, you put one final plunge into Ganondorf, and it's over.
you. I was... We reached you, after all. He's gone. The Demon King. I'm not in a dream, right? You did it. Oh, Link, you really did it. But how am I... No, I understand. I had been sleeping all this time. But when I felt something, like a warm, loving embrace, I woke up. Thank you. Link, I met such wonderful people. I saw Hyrule as it was. I have so much to tell you. So much happened. Oh, Link, I'm home.
Zelda and Link have no fall damage in the water. It's over. Nothing left to say, just like every other Zelda, and I've always admired that. There's still plenty of side quests we didn't even talk about, the fairies, all this other stuff. But I just love the fact that Nintendo says the end and you start before Ganondorf again. I think it's always been admirable. So, Tears of the Kingdom for someone who only played Elden Ring. It's safe to say that I went into Breath of the Wild with some preconceived notions of what this game would provide. I'd imagine some people will take these two open worlds and fight over which is better. The red versus blue, right? Well, games offer a completely different experience while learning from the other on how to master their worlds. There is no doubt in my eyes that Elden Ring learned some lessons from Breath of the Wild, just as there's no doubt in my eyes that Tears of the Kingdom learned from Elden Ring. But that's what great art does, right? It learns a style and takes the parts it enjoyed to make their own vision. Nothing is truly original after all, and the best art always builds from previous foundations. So, would I recommend this game to Elden Ring players? I think it just depends on what you appreciate Elden Ring for. Is it the challenge of bosses? Is it the complex, layered storytelling? Then I would still recommend, but you're not gonna like it more than Elden Ring. Or do you like Elden Ring for exploring, doing quests, learning more about the world, and finding fun ways to kill bosses? The aha moments. Then absolutely I would. You might even like this game more. Zelda is really just simple, and Breath of the Wild allowed for this. You can do anything the way you want in one gigantic sandbox, and it's on the player to share those experiences to others on how they feel. Elden Ring is a different kind of game, but it's also a simple game of dodge and hit when you boil it down. Tears of the Kingdom improves on everything Breath of the Wild had, and almost might make the game harder to revisit, potentially a reason Nintendo doesn't do sequels. Zelda nailed exploration, creativity, and sandbox, while Elden Ring nailed challenge, scope, and adrenaline of overcoming odds. Both focused on different aspects while sharing massive, unforgettable worlds, and I am so happy I got to experience them. Thanks for watching. We still don't know where the Divine Beasts, Guardians, and other things from Breath of the Wild are. Stay tuned for more videos, subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you next time.